Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask if they touch your hair?
Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black Like Me.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. And each week I keep promising you, I keep telling you that we have exciting conversations to put up, and we're meeting with intriguing people all over the place who are talking about issues that impact African-American people and the nation as a whole. And you are not going to be disappointed today. First of all, before I jump into my guest today, I want to say that we now have people listening to Black Like Me podcast in 44 countries. Every state of the union, and now 44 countries, and I'm really excited. And so 1 week, maybe about a month ago, in 1 week, we had 100 downloads from India and France and from the UK. And so I don't know if this is people in the military. I don't know how people are catching wind, but I'm just glad that they are. And so So continue to share this information. Let people know what we're talking about. And I'm just excited to know that people are interested in listening in and just finding out about the things that African Americans think about, process, or things that they keep in mind as they navigate life as an African American in this country. Well, today I'm really excited to have a special guest in the studio. It's a real impressive young man. We met each other probably 4 or 5 years ago, but found out that our families really go back further than that. And it's Ben Wikler. Ben is an impressive young man, as I said, and I don't say that lightly. He's currently the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, and we're going to talk a lot about that in a few minutes. But I appreciate Ben's his wit, his humor. He's a graduate of my alma mater, West High School.
Yes.
He was born the year I graduated. He was born in 1981. I graduated from West in 1981, but highly intelligent. He cares about what's happening in the community. He's worked for like at least two of the world's largest online advocacy organizations, that change.org and move.org.
MoveOn.org.
MoveOn. I keep forgetting that on part. And so Ben, welcome to Black Like Me.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that you're here. So man, listen, I'm not trying to embarrass you, nor am I trying to pump you up. But you know, because you've come to my genealogy event, that I really think understanding our lineage is so important.
Yeah.
And so your dad was a professor at Harvard. You attended Harvard too, correct?
Yes. Although I will note, I got in before he got his job there. So
oh, you did? Okay, gotcha. Okay, good. That's what you got to make that clear. You don't want any of these little tabloid things coming out. And your mother is the director and principal investigator of Families and Schools Together, the FAST program, which I was involved in 30 years ago, not knowing that your mother was connected. But your mother was one of my mom's professors when my mother went back to college to get her master's in social work. So how odd is that our families go back that far? But on your dad's side, your grandfather was a psychiatrist that helped to blaze the trail in terms of looking at how addictions work and withdrawal symptoms. Yep. And your maternal grandmother was an ambassador under, I think he served as two ambassador stints under two different presidents. Am I getting that correctly?
Yeah, my mom's dad.
Your mom's dad. That's right. Your maternal grandfather. Okay. And that's just so exciting. So listen, man, I'm so glad that you're here. You and I had coffee a few months ago, and I talked to you about this. I was excited when you moved back to Madison. A few months ago, folks, I did a live event about some of the genealogy interviews that were going on, and my manager said, Ben Wikler has registered for your podcast. I said, no, Ben lives in DC. There's no way. And first of all, it's a joke. There's no way that Ben knows that I'm doing this. Ben Wikler does not know that I'm doing this, and he's not going to be here. And then the event happens. You show up.
There it was.
I'm like, Ben, what are you doing here? So you explained to me that you're moving back, that you had aspirations of becoming the chair of the Democratic Party for Wisconsin. And so it's just so cool to see how these things have panned out. So let me just breathe for a second, just to say welcome and just ask you how you're doing before I get into all these great questions I have for you. How are you doing, Ben?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, grew up here in Madison, as you said, and went to West, and have worked in progressive politics across the country and around the world, and then have always wanted to move home. And my wife and I now have 3 kids.
Sure.
And after our 3rd child was born, we thought this is a good time to be near grandparents, and started trying to figure out how to move back. We moved back last year, and when we moved back, I was at MoveOn.org. I was involved in fights for progressive causes, social, racial, economic justice across the country. And I thought I was going to stay there. And then the current party chair decided not to run for a 3rd term. So I threw my hat in the ring, ran for state party chair, and was elected this June. And that brings me to this moment.
Have you had any sleep since that election?
There's 398 days until the general election, so I figure I'll sleep after that.
You'll sleep after that, and hopefully that'll be a good sleep.
That'll be
hopefully that'll be a real restful and a good sleep, and not a drunken sleep.
Very different from the sleep in 2016.
Definitely. So between having young children, 3 children, and the move, and having this new job, that's a lot that's going on. And then I appreciate that you took time to come in to really talk about issues that are important to our communities. And specifically, we're going to talk about their importance in the African-American community. That means a lot to me, Ben.
This is so important to me. And you and I sat down. It was one of the first meetings I had after I was elected chair.
Right.
Frankly, like our conversation when we first met, you told me about justified anger and the work that you've been doing in the community, which resonated so much given my own experience growing up in Madison and growing up in Wisconsin. I love our state. Has such a rich progressive history. It is also a state that is racked by very real issues of racism and racial disparities.
Sure.
And that's something that I learned a lot about growing up, and being able to be in a role where I can help us wrestle with that and try to change it is something that drew me to this job. Frankly, it's something that I care so much about.
I think that's great. I love that you bring the passion to the job and that you bring this back home, because so many folks, black and white and all the other ethnic groups, are really, I sense a mass exodus out of Wisconsin. Because some feel that we're not living up to those progressive ideals. And so before we get into talking about your role as the chair of the Democratic Party, just having grown up in Madison, you went out east to go to school and to work, and you're coming back. Are you surprised about the changes and the disparities that we talk about, and 2, at just things you witnessed with your own eyes? Are you surprised at how Madison has changed since you grew up, or do you think maybe these things were going on and I just didn't know because we didn't talk about it?
I mean, they were happening when I was growing up, and we did talk about it, or at least in my house.
Sure,
I was very lucky to have, especially my mom's role. My mom's been a civil rights activist since she was growing up, and that part of it.
She's serious about it. She's very respected in our black community. She really is.
Well, this is one of the central passions of her life, and it comes from her dad. Actually, her dad tells this. My grandfather, who was an ambassador, he put himself through law school by driving a laundry delivery truck on the south side of Chicago. And so he's this white guy, 6'4" like me, and he was had to become a Teamster to get this job, and the Teamsters put him on the south side of Chicago, where a lot of the white truck drivers didn't want to go, and what he has later told me the story when I was growing up, that he discovered in his route that when he opened someone opened the door and it was a black family, they would look at him and figure out in the first 3 seconds whether he was racist and whether he was going to give them a fair price and treat them honestly or seriously. And his job was to treat everyone with equal respect. And he figured out, how to do that, and wound up having an incredibly successful laundry circuit. People would refer him because he wasn't trying to cheat them.
Right.
So that job worked out great for him, and he saw the difference in, he saw like how much the people he was interacting with were experts in deciphering white people, figuring out whether someone was here to harm them or treat them equally. And he then brought that to his whole work as a diplomat, because he was working always across race, religion, culture, different parts of the world. And there's this moment, he passed away recently. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My mom was going through his papers, or maybe her papers about him, and she found this letter. So she grew up overseas sometimes when he was on deployment, and then in Virginia when they were home. And there was the day that the Virginia schools were ordered to desegregate and welcome, African-American kids to come to school. The principal in their district sent a letter to all the white parents saying they didn't need to bring their kids to school. And her dad got the letter and sat down with my mom and said, "Lynn, there's going to be a group of black kids coming to your school today, and you're going to go to school and you're going to make friends with them, and there's going to be a lot of cameras and there might be people yelling, and you should just treat them like you would any other kid, and you're going to go to school. And a whole bunch of white kids didn't go to school. That's part of how private schools in America got started, was a way of dodging Brown versus Board of Education. But and there were all these cameras there, and she went to school that day and met those kids, and that was like a lesson for her about what our family's values were.
You know, I figured that that Lynn had an interesting story. I mean, she and I actually served on the one city school board together.
Yeah.
And I see her in other circles, but you meet people and you sense that there's sensitivity, or you perceive that, and you're not, I don't know what the story is, but you're putting the pieces together that really makes sense. And what you're saying is so important, because when when many of us who are African American are behind closed doors and it's just us, we'll just say, you know, sometimes white progressives want to fix black people or give them sandwiches or backpacks or handouts. Right. But if they would just talk to their children about the realities, the horror of racism, that would really help the fight. And so the fact that your grandfather got the letter, sat down with your mom and said, okay, here's what's going on. Here's what we're not going to do. Here's what you're not going to do. Here's what to expect. And to contextualize it, if we had, to me, that's a major definition, or the hallmark of being progressive, that you don't cover your eyes and say, now, honey, you're not going to see color when you go to school. Right. Here's what's going on, and prep them so that they can become an advocate. You fast forward decades later, your mother's still an advocate, not only here, but abroad. But I have to think that it started with conversations like that. So I just hope that people are really taking note, who are listening, that you talk to your children about what it really means just to love folks. You don't have to go in way back in history and tell your 6-year-old about slavery, but talk to them about love and respect, and that we're all the same.
Yes. Yep. And acknowledging that these things are going on around them.
Right.
And kids can see stuff. And when parents try to tell kids, ignore that, don't think about that, it becomes this taboo subject that they're afraid to go near. And so this is, something my wife and I work with our kids, read them stories about civil rights movement, and, make sure that we talk about race, especially in, racially mixed company, and talk about this stuff.
Definitely.
That for our kids, we want them to be able to navigate these waters the way, frankly, like black kids grow up knowing that they're.
I had to talk right.
Yeah,
exactly. There are many things that we may attempt to even the playing field, but if we're all telling our children about how harmful things in our country's past have gotten us to where we are, but better actions, healthier actions can help us to get back to a good place, then I think that helps to even the playing field, because we all know that we share culpability. But if I'm hearing this at 6, and then I'm meeting people at 18 at the University of Wisconsin who are saying, I've never seen anyone who looks like you, or read anything about you, or know anything other than the Jeffersons, or That's My Mama, or the news, we're at a disadvantage. And so I appreciate the fact that you're continuing that legacy of your grandfather, that your mom and your dad continued that legacy with you, because that's really important.
One thing now is, I think white people who don't have the opportunity to learn about this and work on this, they're at a disadvantage in the world that we're in now.
I think you're right.
It's a skill set that white people need to build, and it's something that I think it's incumbent on parents to talk to their kids and work with them on this. It's something for schools. I mean, my daughter's at one city right now, and we were in a.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, I just rotated off the board because life got crazy. That's good. Okay.
Reading stories about the civil rights movement and understanding about racism now, and this stuff builds skills in kids of all races to navigate a world where these issues are going to be constantly coming up, where they're going to have to confront them in real life. And if for white kids, if they're blindsided by them, it can affect their whole life trajectories too. And frankly, it's this is a burden that everyone should carry together. It's not something that should. It's not like it's only black people's job to deal with racism. This is something that in our society, if we're going to fix this, it's going to be a shared project. And the part of what we try to do with our kids is both learn about the problems and also learn about the civil rights movement and how white allies were able to contribute to the struggle, not at the center of the struggle. We have a huge blown up photo of the March on Washington from 1963 in our living room over the mantelpiece.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay, and just telling the kids the stories about that. And I was able to broadcast that. I hosted a radio show that broadcasted from the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, and talking to the kids about that story. it's a way of giving them a role where they can understand how they can be, part of where we need to go.
So Ben, how do you think we got to the place where people feel that those kinds of discussions with their children or siblings or parents is divisive? Because, I mean, as you're describing it, it makes sense because this is American history and you're helping your children to understand this March on Washington benefited America and not just African Americans, because when everyone is thriving, when each group is thriving, all of America is thriving. Yeah. Any thoughts about how we got to the place where people are just so afraid to do something like that because, well, it might be divisive. So if we just don't talk about it, not trying to put you on the spot as a white person to think for all white people, but I just think folks who are listening, inquiring black minds want to know, it's so healthy to talk about those things, but do you have any insights as to why people might think, I don't want to do that because if we talk about race, it's going to divide us?
So in a lot of, as there's lots of different parts of white culture, but in general, there's an aversion to conflict and a fear of talking about conflict or division. And there's this worry that you'll offend somebody or put someone on the defense. And it sort of goes to the whole notion of white fragility. It's like, if you acknowledge conflict, then there's tension in the room. And I think that's part of it. It's just a lot more comfortable for people not to have to go to dark stuff. I think there's also sometimes an instinct for parents to not want to talk about anything being wrong and create a kind of fantasy world for their kids where, everything's simple and easy and everybody gets along. And I think there's a yearning or sort of a wish that if you ignore racism, it'll go away, that it's enough to not teach your kids to be actively racist. But the fact is that if you don't see it and if you're not able to talk about it and process it, you wind up becoming complicit in it and sucked into it. So I think it's not actually the case that you're protecting kids from this by ignoring it. But I also think a lot of parents struggle, white parents struggle with their own feelings or thoughts about this, or that they are insecure about it. And they don't feel like they have the language. They feel like they'll screw something up. They'll say something their kids will repeat, and then they'll look bad. And it takes work to for white parents to learn how to navigate this and learn how to talk about it in a way that makes sense to people. So I think a lot of it is that fear. And there's one of the great things that I think the civil rights movement have built and cultural work has built is taboos around racism, which Trump is actively trying to break down, and the cultural moment is breaking down. But the flip side of the taboo around racism is that you wind up with a lot of white people that are nervous about talking about race or racism because they're afraid that they'll screw something up. And I think that there's sometimes creating some space or some chances for white people to be able to explore this stuff and unpack it and feel like, it's okay. This is a safe space for them to talk about this stuff, and then find their way to being able to communicate about it. That's really helpful. That's part of what we're trying to do at the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, is to build diversity and inclusion trainings into our work with local activists, neighborhood teams, county parties, so that we can help people have these conversations that they might be nervous about having up front.
I think you're right. That's very important. I was telling you as we were coming into the studio that a lot of my African American friends jokingly say, I can't believe the things you say to your broader white audience, and you're still friends with these folks, and these folks are still listening to you. And it's because, one, I want to take a little of the fear out of the discussion. So I do try to bring a little tongue-in-cheek humor. You work for Al Franken, so you have to certainly understand tongue-in-cheek humor. I mean, because that's just sometimes it keeps me from crying or going under. But I also think that there is such a fear that that my white colleagues carry, that they're going to say something wrong, as small as not capitalizing the B in black, or maybe something even more egregious, that it paralyzes them. And I've also realized just from hearing from friends I've gotten to know really well, is that what I used to think was apathy is just a fear of not wanting to do the wrong thing. Now, there are apathetic people, but there are also folks who are mobilized, so they're really paralyzed with fear. And so part of my work, either through Justified Anger or this podcast, is to bring people in and to say, I'm probably assuming that there's racist tendencies, because to me, that's not the worst thing in the world. We're all swimming in this cesspool of racism. And I have grown up with a sense of insecurity that I didn't earn by just thinking about the color of my skin. I was somehow less than. And so if we're swimming in these same waters, that had to speak to you and others, that there's a sense of superiority. And so let's just acknowledge it and move on. But I feel that here in Wisconsin, our state motto is forward. And this is where we think of ourselves as these great progressives, and we're thought leaders. But sometimes the fear that we're going to do something wrong impedes us from moving ahead.
That's totally right.
Or the sense we're riding on our laurels, that we've done great things in the past, that we don't have to do anything. And so I find myself really trying to let people know we're crazy if we don't think that the residual effects of racism don't exist. So let's call it and move ahead. Because one of my greatest mentors is a guy who introduced himself to me. It was a group check-in, and he said, "Hi, my name is Pete, and I'm a recovering racist." I said, "Wait, what did that white man just say?" He's a what? And the black folks in the room were so touched by that blatant honesty that we gravitated towards him. He became a father figure to me. I eulogized him when he passed away years later. But people would have thought that would make you say, okay, I'm not sitting by him. You know, my thing is, you know, leave the porch jockeys out there so that I know whose house not to go to. You know, I don't like Confederate flags, but at least I know I'm not going to trick or treat at your house.
Right.
And so I'm not saying I want these things up, but for black folks, it's like, we just want to know if that's where you are. We know how to cross the street. We've been crossing the street a long time. But let's not act like these things aren't here. So I like what you're saying. In this show, my work, even, you know, Nehemiah's work has really been about building capacity in African Americans. But with the implementation of the Justified Anger initiative, is to really begin to look at structural racism. So how do I build relationships with police chiefs of police, judges? We talked a little bit about judges who went through our history class, the state public defender, the DA, because I realized, if I can build capacity or help to build capacity with our team in African Americans, but build real bridges to our non-African American allies, that's how things really begin to move ahead. And I see that vision in you as you're talking about how you want to recover some ground that you think the Democratic Party may have lost, or but let's do that in order to really move ahead. And let's not just assume I'm fine, you're fine, we're all good, right? Let's just move ahead. Is that a fair assessment?
That is absolutely it. I think for white folks, there's often this idea that if you don't say the word racism, if you don't acknowledge it, it's no one will think it's happening, and that you can sweep it under the rug. Actually, the safety to screw up a little bit, acknowledging that, you know, all of us across race are weird in a world where you know,
we're going to do something wrong.
Exactly, everyone's going to screw up. I'm going to screw up, and it's turning down the temperature a little bit so that that's okay, and people can venture out on the ledge a little bit. Allows you to have the kind of the honest conversations that we need to have to be able to do stuff. And if we don't figure out how to work on this, you know, Democrats are going to lose elections. Policies will be put in place that make these structures and systems work. And if we don't have these conversations and Democrats win, Democrats might also screw it up. And there's plenty of history of that too.
Sure.
The way I think a lot about structural power in my work in social movements and at the Democratic Party. And to me, the key thing is having all the different folks at the table where decisions are made, so that it's not like you want to have a shared language and shared understanding and analysis. You also want to have representation in the room so that there's no option but to think about all these different factors when people are talking. And if you having a group of white folks who think about race and understand about race is better than having them, you know, blind to it or be actively promoting white supremacy. But it is much better to have an actually multiracial group of people that is making decisions and figuring out in terms of candidate outreach, you know, what kinds of policies go into the state party platform, like all these kinds of decisions. You got to have everyone at the table if you want to get it right. Otherwise, I think of inclusion and equity as like putting the bumpers in the bowling lane, that if everyone's at the table, you can't actually throw a gutter ball because
that's a good analogy.
Someone's going to say, "Oh, what about this?" Yeah.
No, that's good. That's really good. You know, you didn't come here to talk about the things that you're doing well or right, like in your personal life, but there are things I'd love to underscore. Your children are at One City, which is a very diverse early learning program. In fact, like I said, I was the chair of that board for a little bit. But I talk to parents who say, I want my children to have a more diverse experience, but they don't want to drive to the south side of a community, Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, to do that. And so there's this thought that although the dinner table is quite often homogenous in our homes, they somehow think that their children are going to really diversify when they go to schools. And so, I mean, this might seem like a no-brainer, but I've talked to parents for decades about, well, why do the black kids sit together and why don't they just mix it up? And who's guiding them, who's navigating that. And so I just think that that's a great reminder. I say to people, if you want your children to grow up thinking differently about cultures, being led by a male who's black, teachers who are black, teachers who are white, because the staff is diverse, beautifully diverse, and so are the students.
Yeah.
It's just a great reminder that if you want your children to have a cross-cultural experience, then the parents have to facilitate that and not just hope it's going to come out in soccer practice, football practice, cheerleading practice, or in math class. That parents might have to really do some things to put their children in either after-school programs, religious programs, whatever your thing is. You've got to go out of your way and not just expect black people or people of color to come to you or to your neighborhood.
Totally.
I just think that's important. I've got so many things that I want to just throw at you, sort of like some of them are just sort of rapid fire, but others I'd just love to get your thought on.
Absolutely.
Is Al Franken as funny in person as he is on television?
He's hilarious.
And he's, even when he's off the camera and stuff, he's sitting around, like, does he, like, would he make jokes?
No, he goes for the laugh.
Did you really work 15 hours a day?
At the end stretch of that book, I was living on his couch in his for a little while. I think his son was at camp, and I moved into his son's bedroom just to crash between working on chapters in the book. And then at some point, he came home and was like, "Who the hell is this guy?"
Somebody's been sleeping in my bed. This is like.
I should say the backstory. So at the end of college, Al Franken was a fellow at Harvard, and I was lucky enough to apply and become one of his research assistants.
Oh, that's how it started, right?
Actually, on the strength of when I grew up here in Madison, I was obsessed with The Onion, which was based in Madison at the time. And I had an underground student newspaper that I used to always send to The Onion, which had a secret, their headquarters were secret because they didn't want people coming and annoying them. So one day they wrote back to me and my friends and said, "Your paper's pretty funny, you should come in." And my friend and I started writing for them when we were in high school and did that through college. So when I met Al and he saw that I had been writing for The Onion, was studying economics and working in politics, he was like, "Okay, you're on the team.
You're my people. You're my people." You know, when I got a little older and I started seeing references to The Onion online, like I remember one of the first non-Madison references I saw, I think Colin Powell said, "The only time I cry," something to that effect, "is when I read The Onion," or something like that. And I said, how does he know about The Onion? So I had no idea that this local Madison thing went national. So it blows my mind when people outside of Madison make reference to The Onion. I'm like, that's like someone talking about the Isthmus. Like, how do you know about that's like someone quoting the Badger Herald, or the Daily Cardinal. You know, now I'm talking UW-Madison newspapers.
Yeah, it was all like pizza pit coupons.
Yeah, exactly. Up, hey, don't say pizza pit unless you got some. That is the best pizza parlor in the world. Hey, other than fatherhood and your current job, what's been your hardest job up till now?
Oh, that's interesting. I will say, I mean, the most rewarding work, I think.
Sure. When I was going to ask you, rewarding it
was like simultaneously incredibly intense, but also it had a quality similar to what I feel right now, which is that I wake up every day just knowing exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. And feeling like this. I remember doing this exercise in a leadership development program where you imagine if you only had 6 months or a year to live, what would you do? And in that role and what I'm doing now, I wouldn't quit my job. So the role I'm thinking about.
That's impressive.
It was 2009, and I was working to try to get a global treaty on climate change. I was working for a group called AVAZ, which is like an international human rights, democracy, and climate change advocacy group. And I had about 50 people who were working on my team all over the world, and we were running simultaneous campaigns in all these different countries to try to get a global climate treaty to avert a climate crisis. And the thing about climate change is it affects everybody, but it also affects the most marginalized people first and worst. So the poorer you are in the world and within individual countries, the more likely you are to be hit by its effects. And
probably the less likely you are to even be aware of it because you're thinking about where you're going to sleep or what you're going to eat that day.
And the less ability you have to, put your house on stilts or do the things to mitigate it. You can't afford, if you're in a slum in India, you can't afford air conditioning. And it goes profoundly to the sort of all the injustices in the world, and it's something that could unite humanity to fight against it. And so during this, especially in that period in 2009, I was just waking up every day. I was traveling all over the world. We were advocating to all these governments.
Right.
What happened at the end of that year? There was this global summit. All the governments came together, and at the final moment, the plan for a treaty fell apart because the U.S. wasn't ready to go there. Fundamentally because of Republicans in Congress, and I mean, Democrats and Republicans weren't ready to reach the kind of global treaty that we needed.
Right,
And that moment for me actually made me think, for all there's this giant global crisis, I need to focus on what's happening in the United States if we want to make progress on everything.
So that was sort of the turning point for you?
There's a direct line from that moment to what I'm doing right now in Wisconsin. I think that what we do in Wisconsin this year and the next year and a half is going to have more impact on the future of humanity than the work of people almost anywhere at any time.
Thank you for that. To me, there seems to be, we're at this ironic and very pivotal juncture in Wisconsin. On one hand, there are media sources that say it's the absolute worst place to live if you're black, if you look like me. But Eric Holder was going to be here a few weeks ago, and I reached out to his office, and the response was, I had to cancel that trip, but I'm going to be coming back soon because Wisconsin's a very key state in the election. So, thoughts about the irony of on one hand, the nation and the world will be looking at Wisconsin at the upcoming presidential election, but then it's also this place with mass incarceration, disparities. African American people are just struggling so much. It's got to be so unique that we're known sort of this obscure, upper Midwest state that we're so key and so big on important issues. I don't know, just the irony of that is a little bit overwhelming. Do you ever think about the fact that, you and your team is helping to bring the Democratic, National Convention here next year to Milwaukee, but then we've got all these things about mass incarceration. There's a lot of attention on Wisconsin right now.
There really is.
In some ways, other ways it's not, but in some ways a lot of attention.
So I think these things are actually intimately linked.
I was wondering if you thought they were.
So if you look at, in terms of the presidential election, if you line up all the states where Trump's less popular than he is in Wisconsin, it's not enough to win the Electoral College. And you line up all the states where Trump's more popular than he is in Wisconsin, it's not enough to win. So you have to win Wisconsin to win the presidency. That's what makes us the tipping point state.
Okay. Thank you for explaining because I was wondering about that. Now, have we known that before people started saying that nationally? Has Wisconsin known that?
Just in the last few months. So this is
seriously?
Yeah. So people in 2016, everyone thought, or on the Democratic side, people thought Wisconsin was a lock. The polling had Clinton way up, and the Clinton campaign basically thought that Wisconsin was safe. They didn't need to focus on the work here.
Wow.
In retrospect, it was the tipping point state in 2016 also. And like if you basically add up the Electoral College votes, once they had Wisconsin, Trump was going to win. And Michigan and Pennsylvania, the other famous blue wall states that fell, those were sort of icing on the cake. And at this point, Democrats are in a stronger position in those two states than they are in Wisconsin. The reason why Wisconsin is right in the middle is it's not because voters are more Republican here. There's a couple of pieces of it. To me, a huge part of this is the legacy of Scott Walker's divide and conquer strategy, and essentially fueling racism and using racism as a way to divide folks to be able to win elections and pick the pockets of people of all races. And if you look at the policies they put in place around voter ID that suppress votes, around campaign finance law, and also the attacks on labor unions, which have a mixed and complicated legacy on race, but have been engines, especially in Milwaukee, of building a black middle class.
Right.
They targeted unions intensively, in part to eliminate their ability to get out the vote efforts in the African American community. And what happened in 2016 is the African American vote in Milwaukee went down about 19%, and there are things on the Democratic Party side that are at fault for that, and there's these structural factors. There's a bunch of different pieces of that, but it's the kind of underlying disparities in race and structure and factors around structural race context where Wisconsin could bring black political power, help create the context where Wisconsin could become a state, even after going Democratic in presidential election after presidential election, created this moment where Wisconsin is right on the cusp. It could be the state that elects Trump to another cycle, or it could be the state that doesn't. And the other side of those policies, mass incarceration is a good example. Minnesota's right next door was very similar. Their rates of incarceration have been going down. Wisconsin's have been going up.
Right.
And it's been used by Republicans as an economic engine to move wealth into, wider, more rural communities, and also move human bodies from black communities into rural communities, where then they're counted, Republicans would argue, as residents of the places where they're incarcerated rather than the places where they're from when it comes to getting public funds.
Yeah, Wow.
I know.
And that's true. I mean, people don't believe that this is true. That's true.
Literally true. It goes really deep. And it's, these things compound on each other.
Sure. For a number of reasons, Ben, it's tough being African American in America. And again, I'm middle class, educated, graduate degree, so I'm not going to come in here and just bemoan the fact that that some of my first world issues are worse than what people are dealing with who are trying to find housing or trying to find their children.
It doesn't make those things go away.
It doesn't make them go away. But what's really difficult is on any given day, and it could be because I'm a pastor, Republicans will reach out to me. I mentioned this to you when we were having coffee.
Yeah.
Or they'll come to my office, and sometimes my friends who are Democrats will say, but what was their agenda? I said, well, at least they made their agenda known because they came.
Yeah.
And so we know that historically African Americans used to vote Republican. That's connected with Lincoln and stuff. And then, and then probably in the 60s, is that when the big sort of the shift came? Was it early in the 60s?
The one part of it happened under FDR, but the biggest moment really came when Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
The Voting Rights
Exactly.
Act.
And so there's this whole big shift where I think African Americans started thinking maybe the Democrats, understand us or get us or want us to be at the table. But what I hear from a lot of African Americans, and I feel this on certain days, that stats about us will be quoted, but there's no true empowerment. So people will say, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, but then their cabinets, their teams don't reflect the type of leadership that they're trying to promote. So there's this real fear that, okay, maybe we can't trust the Republicans because of all of these things that are happening, particularly in Wisconsin, because I think between Scott Walker and what's happening with Trump, I think black folks, have realized, okay, even if I've traditionally been Republican, I'm not that brand of Republican. Yeah. But on the other end, I've heard more black people in my life talk about not voting because they feel that the Democrats who say we know, we understand, don't really get things firsthand from us. They'll say, I've heard, or don't come to community forums, or don't really empower, or will support programs, but not really opening doors for black people to sit as equals at the table. And so whether that's the intention or not, I don't want to get into. I guess one of the things I'm wondering is, can you understand? Is that a fair perception?
Yeah, I totally understand it. And I think.
And how do we get there? So please answer that. I want to know how you think we got there.
So I think part of it is, I think often my beloved white liberals can have this notion that people should see, should line up all the policy positions for the parties, and they should see, people should get the Democratic parties, whose side Democrats are on, whose side Republicans are on, and everyone should vote accordingly. And it misses the incredible history and legacy of taking people for granted, and even of betrayals and double cross and all this kind of stuff that's happened on both sides of the political spectrum. You have to start with the assumption that you're in a low trust environment, that there's not a built-in trust for any system of power in a society that has failed people over and over. And in a low trust environment, you have to start by showing up and building relationships.
That's so true.
And to me, it's just elemental. And I think the Democratic Party at its worst can take people for granted and fail to show up. And I think there's this interesting kind of parallel where in rural communities, Democrats can write people off if they don't show up, and in especially the African American community, and frankly the Latinx community as well, Democrats can assume that people, can have a bunch of assumptions in their heads and not show up. And the way that the Democrats have to change that is by doing what Republicans are doing right now, which is to actually reach out and listen. It starts with listening. It starts with having conversations.
That's huge.
Understand. And the second piece is figuring out how to get people at the table so that it's not the Democratic Party isn't a they who are coming to voters. It's a we. And getting to that point where the candidates that are running for different offices, the people who are staffing their campaigns, the volunteers knocking on doors, and the voters that are talking to reflect all the communities that our party and the state are trying to organize and represent. That's where we get to a point where people have the trust and the faith that they will be heard and taken for real. Part of what's happened historically is the Democratic Party fell into this trap where it would organize a huge campaign every few years, often a presidential, sometimes in a big way in the off years, and then would essentially shut down in between. And The experience
it feels like that sometimes,
right? That people, you only hear from Democrats when they're asking for your vote a couple weeks before.
Right.
But where have you been the rest of the year? Right. And where have you been when we're fighting, issues in our actual lives, not just at election time?
Sure.
So one of the big changes we've made at the state party is to go into a year-round organizing model where we're actually building neighborhood teams and knocking on doors in off years as well. And that when we knock on people's doors, we start not by telling people how they should vote or telling people, here's what you need to know about us. You start by asking people what issues they're dealing with in their lives. Of
course.
And it turns the model on its head. And it means, I spend a fair amount of my time raising money for the party to be able to fund those organizers. But it really transforms our work. We have teams. We have 200 teams all over the state. We've knocked on 200,000 doors this year. And
seriously,
yes, which we've never done a year out from an election. My predecessor, Martha Lanning, started this program. We've just been accelerating and building it.
I met her.
Great. Yep. But the thing is that if you're not there, if you only show up when you need something from someone else, then they get it. They understand what you're doing there. And our mission at the party is to elect Democrats to office and then pass the progressive agenda to make Wisconsin a place that works for everyone. And to do that, it means building a relationship, not just when we need people to vote, but all the time.
Sure. Do you, is there any room in the Democratic platform, both nationally, but I'll ask you specifically about at the state level, of at least revisiting the progressive agenda to see what that really means? I mean, because as a Madisonian, that feels as comfortable as saying Birkenstock or Babcock ice cream. It's just it's part of the Madison culture. You hear it, but when that was designed, Black people weren't at the table.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, is there room or wiggle room in the Democratic agenda? And I don't mean agenda negatively. It's plan, it's platform to really sit down with key African American thinkers and people from other groups and say, this is what we mean when we say progressive. Because sometimes Black people hear progressive is, we'll put you on brochures so because you guys are good at kicking the door open, you're going to make noise. You're not going to do Minnesota nice. Black people are going to say, oh, hell no. I mean, we're going to say that we're going to march across bridges. We're going to have dog piss thrown on us. But the thought is, once the doors start opening, everyone gets promoted and they forget about the Black folks. So I think it's important in any kind of movement to think about language, because when I hear progressive, I don't get warm fuzzies. And it makes me a little nervous. I'm thinking, that sounds great. It sounds like we're all on the same page, right? But what I find is, as I use my voice more, it's the white progressives who press against me. It's white progressives who have said, what do you say to people who think you have too much power? So the reason why I created this podcast is so that I don't want to be invited to media outlets just when they want me to fit into a Black story. Like I'm talking to a white guest about the Democratic platform and not just about what are y'all going to do about the inner city issue. I mean, I want to know how the Democratic Party thinks about Black people, not Black inner city people alone, but Black folks. Because I don't get asked to think about the Democratic Party. I get asked to talk about only the Black.
You're asked to talk about race.
I'm asked to talk about, and not leadership and not politics. And so I would hope, and I'm on the spot, and I'm here on my own show, Black Like Me, going on record saying this. But if I can be helpful in those discussions or bringing other Black thought leaders together, I think with so much writing on Wisconsin next year, let's at least understand that if we're saying we're all about a progressive agenda, that there aren't a group saying, oh, hell no, that's what screwed us, or that's what's progressives who I'm afraid of. When Black people say they would rather deal with racism in Georgia, Stone Mountain, Dallas, Mississippi, we're experiencing the greatest migration of Blacks from the north to the south than we've ever seen in this country. My colleagues are building homes on property in Mississippi as we speak, in North Carolina. And so I want to make so when Black people say they appreciate the racism in the South because they know where they stand, the average Black person will say, I don't know where I stand with white progressive because you love my agenda until my daughter falls in love with your son. You love my agenda until I become your supervisor, or until I say, no, that's not what Black people think. We don't want another handout. No, this is what we want. We want economic development. And so my suggestion as a voter, as a guy out here, let's revisit what it means to be progressive.
I think that is so on point. And to me, so the way that the party sets its platform is at our state convention, which is going to happen next June. And
that's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge. We have a state convention. Then we
I
have
need to get there, but I need a behind the scenes.
You should come. So
can I come?
You should come. You should record a show there. You should come. You should participate.
Oh, snap.
That would be great.
Eli, you hearing that? No, I would love to. I'm serious. No, I didn't mean to cut you up, but I would love to.
We have our state convention in June and the national convention in July. So we have
right back to back. Okay.
Yep.
And are they always in the same cities, or is that just unique here for next year?
So the state convention is actually going to be in, I think in the Wisconsin Dells.
Okay, so it's not necessarily.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And so the state convention, it alternates years. Every other year, you elect the state party chair and vice chairs, and amend the state constitution and bylaws.
Okay.
The opposite year, you set the state party platform.
Sure.
And so to get stuff into the state party platform, you basically have folks proposing platform items through their counties and then through their congressional districts, and they get to the state party. So to me, the key thing is having African American folks involved in the party all the way through.
Right.
And one of the things that I love about Sheila Stubbs, who's our representative here in Madison.
Sure. I love Sheila.
She used to be the chair of the Black Caucus of the state party.
Right,
When
of course,
she helped dramatically grow that caucus. She organized a whole bunch of folks from her community, especially from her church, to register for the state party, come to the state convention. And that became a voting bloc that had meaningful power in the state party.
It's that simple. I mean, I'm not trying to belittle it, but it's not like you got to have lots of money or all this endorsement. It's relationship and community organizing.
Exactly. And
wow.
And I think that the worst thing is when the state party is kind of this closed box. It seems like the establishment over there. It's literally you can just show up at the convention, you can show up at the congressional district, or you can go on the website and register. You get the invitation to come. And I
never knew that. I'm embarrassed to state, but I didn't know that it was that simple to become involved.
Almost nobody knows that, and that's a problem. I mean, I think that's something that we've got to change in how the state party works to help people know.
Because those are seats of power. Like, people tell us, vote. Can we come to your church and have a voter registration booth? No one has ever called me. You and I've had similar conversations, but other than your being in this position as chair, has even remotely come close to saying, well, here's how the power structures really work. Get folks from your church and other churches. You're part of the African American Council of Churches. You work with lots of other cross-cultural groups. This is what you really want to do, Alex, because this is how you make change. I think people need more options than just going to the ballot. How do you get to the power seats? How do you really help to influence change? And you've simplified it, but I consider myself a bit woke and educated, and I'm assuming that if I don't know that these things exist, other African Americans don't know either. That might be just the thing we need to help African Americans rethink the Democratic Party and their involvement in it. I think people often don't get involved in something because they don't know where the on-ramps are. Exactly. And sometimes the way that power operates is by having it be opaque and difficult to understand. How do you pull these levers? And I think if we change that and open the door so the Democratic Party becomes a big we as opposed to a they. And if people are actually writing the platform, then they know that issues are in there. I recently learned that Wisconsin has the lowest rate of black home ownership in the country. We're at 7%. Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Right. Because that's how you acquire wealth and equity.
That has been the engine. And that's the core of the racial wealth gap in this country, especially after in 2008, it wiped out so much African American wealth. And if you look at white wealth, it's sort of crept back up and black wealth hasn't. And we've actually gone backwards as a country. This is the kind of thing that should be in our party platform. And even as chair, my role is actually limited in terms of setting the platform. It is the people who are in the room. And so my message to folks is let's get in the room to make sure that we get this stuff in there. I think it's a strategic imperative for the party to be able to reflect all the voices that need to be at the table, because that's then how we win. And it also makes the party that it should be, which is a party that does represent all these different voices and all these different communities. That's how we get where we need to go.
Hey everybody, we hope you've been enjoying this episode. My name's Tyler Nyland. I am the podcast manager for Black Like Me, and I wanted to let you know about an opportunity that you have if you've been looking to really gain better access and hear more about what we're doing with Black Like Me. We have an opportunity called Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/blacklikeme, you can find our page where we offer a lot of different opportunities for you to get involved or to join us in this work. So if you go on there, you'll see a bunch of different tiers that you can join, where you can become financial supporters. And with each different tier, you get an opportunity to receive different benefits from us. So if you would go to patreon.com/blacklikeMe, you can check out all the different tiers and options that we are able to give you. And you can really just support the mission of what we do here at Black Like Me. So we want to thank you for being a listener. That's awesome. Please go to patreon.com/blacklikeMe. If you have any other questions, go to alexg.com/contact to fill out the form for a Black Like Me insurance. Now, back to the episode.
Now, you're part of a younger generation. You certainly have worked with digital organizations that were online. Do you plan to use that platform to help get your message out? Because I'm touched by the things that you're saying and opportunities that will soon avail themselves for people of color. But I'm also concerned a lot has got to happen by June and July of next year. So I'm curious. Are you? I know you've been a podcast host in the past, but how do you divide you and your team up? Like, how do you get out? How do you get your message to the churches, the Black community, the various communities? But again, this is Black Like Me, so let me be selfish and ask about the Black community. Yeah. Are you thinking about how to get podcasts out or videos out or information out that will just to help invigorate the Black community? Because I think we talk about getting to the polls as if we don't drive. I mean, we get to barbershops, we get our nails done, we eat. You can look, we eat, we get where we want to go. But I think people miss the question. We're not inspired and don't feel included. And you're hinting at, Ben, inclusion and something that can inspire hope. But when people have been so disillusioned, you can't just show them the same level of invitation that you do with someone who's otherwise engaged. Yeah. Knowing that people are more downcast and with Trump hasn't shocked Black people. Right. For white people, it's like, how could this possibly have happened? Oh my God! For Black people, it's like, exactly. Let me tell you how this happened. Like I was listening to Don Lemon. Like this guy's really talking about a moat with alligators and stuff. I thought, okay, this has got to be The Onion. You know, this is not really Don Lemon. It's someone that looks like him. Like our president would not say this. He would not say these kinds of things. And so I think what happened to me as a Black person was, I told y'all. Yeah. You called me an angry Black man. I told y'all. So I think for us, it's sort of the sucker punch of, we've been using all of this energy to tell you that this is the case. Yeah. This man has proven that this is where we are. And then the fear now is whenever he's impeached or ousted out because of a new election, because of his replacement, that people are going to think when he's gone, we're better. They don't understand he only voiced, I refer to him as a ventriloquist dummy, that he only gave voice. He sits on America's lap saying what America's been saying subtly for 400 years. Yeah. So now our fear is, well, if he's reelected, y'all are going to really see. We've been through worse, and so we're just going to hunker down. But if he's not, and he's replaced by someone, white people are going to say, the happy music is going to start playing. They're going to start riding off into the sunset. So there's so much that's going on inside our hearts when our voices, our votes, our insights are needed. And so what I offer just from friend to friend is we've got to really find a way to not only explain to people the seriousness of this upcoming election, which is very true, the level of dismay and disillusionment has got to be understood. Because if you don't understand what you're dealing with, you're giving someone an aspirin when they need an epidural. If you want them to get through this space. And I'm hoping someone in your circles, in your cabinets, in the communities are understanding that, because we've always fought for what's good for this country. Of course. You pick a war, we fought. My family's, my grandfather, my uncles, we fought to still be a second-class citizen. We're losing the will to fight, to just come back and then not be seen as someone who's worthy of those same benefits. And it's aggregate. It's so easy to say that was then this and that becomes aggregate. And so I just want folks to understand, we're not just dealing with folks who don't know to vote. I'm dealing with educated Black people who understand what a vote is, what a ballot is. But the question is, why the hell do I want to go in there and invite someone who doesn't wear red? They're blue, but at the end of the day, they treat me like they're red. They're not going to hire me.
How's it going to be different?
My economics are not going to change. I'm not going to be in those circles. And so at the end of the day, it hurts no matter who's calling you the N-word, or if you don't call me, you treat me like it. And so I think I'm just trying to put all of that out there to really to really understand. People telling us to vote, 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 but what we're doing is the perception is that we are voting for people who wear different colors, but their platforms are not necessarily any more inclusive. Their rhetoric is better. They don't say we're from shitholes. There's certain things that they won't do. But we got communities that they say that they look at like shitholes. They treat them that way because they drive around them, but haven't really lifted the Black agenda, may not even know the Black agenda, and don't know that we have wanted to be a part of this since we were stolen and brought here and never really given a full chance. And I think whoever gets to the Black vote first and gives them a sense that this is your country too, and you can live out that dream and you can acquire whatever you need to take care of your family, Black folks are going to lean into that irrespective of where their conventions are or what colors they wear. And I just want somebody to know that so they can be proactive in reaching us.
Yeah. So the metaphor, your metaphor is so powerful for fighting in foreign wars and coming back as a second-class citizen. It's exactly what we need to make sure does not happen. That if Democrats win in 2020, we're going to win based on a multiracial coalition of people voting, and it's going to be Black people and white people standing up together and saying no to Trump and yes to something else. My friend Rashad Robinson, who runs Color of Change, says it's not enough to hate them for people to love you. You actually have to present something that is a different vision that actually inspires people. Right. And right now we're in this moment where we don't have the nominee for the Democratic Party, so we don't know what the message is going to be. But I will say that if you watch the Democratic primary debates, the conversation is so different now about these issues than it's been in previous elections. There is I think there's a kind of a quiet revolution that's happened that Trump has provoked about especially white people waking up to the fact that they are surrounded by structures and embedded cultural beliefs that are built around white supremacy. And the key thing that we've got to do is use this moment when so many people are seeing these issues plainly in a way that African Americans have been doing for centuries, to use this moment to then do a ground shift, a shift in power, a shift in who's at the table, and a shift in how we organize so that after Trump is out, we have ratcheted up to a new level in terms of how we fight this stuff, and then we don't just go back to the old way. Right. That is the key. I think there was a lot of for some folks, for some white progressives, there was, to use that word. After Obama was elected, it was like, aha, okay, we're post-racial now. We've solved racism. This is not happening.
We told you.
Yeah, and then Ferguson. You know what I mean? Then like these moments came, and of course, African Americans were experiencing everything, the same structures were in place in their own lives. These moments that sort of pierced white consciousness came along, and still, exactly as you were saying, people couldn't believe that people, white liberals couldn't believe that people around them might vote for Trump. There was a study that I just read that found that if you look at who the effect of dog whistle appeals to racism are, it's actually not conservatives who respond the most strongly. It's white liberals who harbor racial resentment.
Ding, ding,
You're not surprised.
Amen. Preach it. Where's my tambourine? Yes.
Yeah. And that to some extent, they are the target that Trump is trying to reach for.
Yes.
It's such a real thing, right? And so we've got to use this moment to break into a new place. And to me, the key way that we do that, so you're asking how we do this outreach, it starts with sitting down with different leaders. I've been talking to my friend, I was just talking to Gwen Jones, who runs the NAACP of Dane County. Yeah.
Our kids went to school together.
Yep. And we're talking about organizing a meeting of a bunch of different Black-led organizations in Madison to talk about the next year and a half and how we can work together, how the Democratic Party can partner. I think the Democratic Party can, reach out to folks on an individual level, and there's some new technologies that we can use to do that. Peer-to-peer text messaging is something that reaches everybody and is much,
This gets at the question I was asking you earlier about, like, how do you use technology to get? I like that.
There's Push Black. It's this amazing. It's I think the largest. Push Black, I believe, it's the largest online African American digital news network, and it all goes through Facebook Messenger. It has millions of subscribers across the country.
What?
Yes.
Okay, I got to look into it. Eli, we got to look into that.
Yeah.
Eli said he's heard of it.
It is amazing.
Wow.
And so partnering with different organizations and institutions to be able to reach people through trusted messengers, as opposed to, if you don't know me, like, who the hell is this white guy showing up and talking about this stuff? I think it starts with going through relationships and channels where there's already a sense of trust, and doing the listening up front to figure out how the Democratic Party needs to show up. And to me, the first big opportunity is this spring, April 7th. There's local elections all over the state of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And asking, organizations and networks and communities who should be running for office. How can we help lift them up? Because if we have the most diverse slate of candidates in the spring of 2020, candidates bring their voters out. They connect and mobilize their communities like no other force. And who the candidates who run are has a powerful effect on whether people see themselves in the party and in the political system. Then we build from there to the convention. And this is a value that is shared through the whole team at the convention. It's got to be the most inclusive convention in Democratic Party history. And the process for selecting which vendors are going to provide, all the different kinds of services.
Exactly. That's really important too.
Yeah, it's this engine of economic opportunity that could be an engine for changing the economic disparities by race in Wisconsin.
And this is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity. One of my listeners is an African American woman, and she said, "I want you to ask Mr. Wikler this question." She said, "What's the Democratic Party doing for helping more Black women get into politics, or what's the thought about, one, she just wants to know, is the Democratic Party understanding, wow, these sisters are making
backbone of the Democratic Party.
And are we working hard to really bring them into key places and to help to do something that will cause younger African American women to think about politics. So is there an awareness that these sisters are really, they're voting and they're getting out and they're making change happen?
Absolutely. And it's, we're working now to figure out how to embed this through every layer of how the party operates. And it's everything from how we hire folks for the team to how, what channels we use and how we communicate with people.
Exactly.
It's at each of these different steps. It means having an inclusive group of folks at the table, and then having a strategy that bakes in the principles of equity and inclusion from day one, as opposed to making a plan with a group of white people in the room and then tacking it on at the end.
Definitely. I can't tell you how many settings I've been in, whether it's races at the Senate level or the gubernatorial level, where candidates have come in to meet with Black leaders and have come with just young white staff, and they said, we want to know about the issues of the African American community. And we're thinking, if you knew Black people, they could help to give you that inside intel. So please, Ben, send that memo out that don't meet with Black people with an all-white staff and say, tell us what life is like here. Couple of just other rapid-fire questions.
Yep.
Do you ever watch some of the debates on television? And I'm not going to ask you who you think is going to be the nominee. I just love the fact that it will be determined in Wisconsin.
Yes.
But do you ever just listen to some of the debates and just think, ooh, I wish I could have coached that person on these issues? So you think about that. No, I got you. I mean, you have
but
to
I'm guessing that you have that experience too.
Definitely. Because I'm thinking, okay, we had it into this point. So I'm certainly curious about that. Are we going to get an impeachment? Is this? Do you? And if you can't comment on this, let me know. But there are some who are thinking this is just sort of political grandstand. But there are others who are like, this might be the thing that just might really get this impeachment. Can Donald Trump be impeached?
So there's impeachment and there's conviction on impeachment.
The
Senate convicts, the House impeaches. And my guess would be, just reading the tea
Explain
leaves,
that difference, because I get them mixed up, and I want people who are listening to also know.
Absolutely. And the way people use the term impeached to mean impeached and removed from office as shorthand.
Exactly.
But in the Constitution, the way that it's set up is the House votes on impeachment, which is like indicting someone.
Okay, gotcha.
And then it goes to a trial in the Senate. In the Senate trial, it's actually the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court who runs the trial. So John Roberts walks over to the Senate, he runs the trial, and then the senators are like the jury.
That's how it works.
Yeah. And so the thing is, this is John Roberts, appointed by George W. Bush, and then who gutted the Voting Rights Act, and Mitch McConnell deciding whether Trump should be impeached.
Okay. All right.
Whether should be convicted, I should say. So,
should be convicted.
Yeah. So my guess is that he does get indicted. He does get impeached. I mean, he has broken so many laws, done so much. But the question of whether Republicans are going to break ranks and throw him out of office, something deep would have to change. I mean, for Republicans in the Senate, they are more worried that a pro-Trump Republican runs a primary campaign and throws them out of office in their primary than they are about facing the music in the general election. And the Republicans would have to give up on Trump at the voter level before the Republican senators would. And that, to me, we're building our, having contingency plans is also important, but we're building our central plan around how do you defeat Donald Trump in this general election.
Sure.
And something I want to say about how that plan works.
Yes, please do.
So there's this there's this debate that if you read, national press is playing out between should Democrats be focused on turnout or persuasion? And part of that is code words for should Democrats be focused on engaging African-American voters, voters of color,
Yes.
or should they be trying to focus on convincing whites who may have voted for Trump to switch over? Wisconsin's a state where to win, you actually have to do both. It's not an either or. But the thing that's underneath the national debate is this idea that you can't talk about race and racism without turning off white people. And there's actually there's research about this that suggests a way forward, which we talk about constantly within the team. The research finds that both for voters of color and for white voters, the most powerful message is explaining that Trump and Republicans use racism to try to divide people and distract people while they pick the pockets of people of all races. And that Trump's policies on schools and jobs and taxes, they hurt people whether you're black, brown, or white.
Sure.
And that the way that they get away with those policies is by whipping up racial resentment among white voters. And so when Trump does these things, when he says go back, send her back about Democratic congresswomen, what he's doing there is this intentional, cynical thing to get people to inflame white voters along racial lines so he can get away with policies that benefit people like himself. And pointing about how racism is a strategy, that makes sense to voters who might feel the appeal of some of those attacks from Trump. That allows people to get past that and think about what's actually at stake for me here. And it also it's a message that makes sense to people across race. And I think for Democrats, especially Democrats who are worried about alienating white people who might have harbor some of these feelings, it's actually safe and okay for them to talk about race in the context of the election by explaining what work it does for Republicans, how they use this as a strategy. It's not something Democrats have to run from. So this is a something I want, especially I want candidates to hear. And sometimes you hear candidates, being able to navigate this well. Historically, one of the things that Democrats can fall into is essentially trying to choose either they're going to speak to issues of race or try to ignore them completely. That, either of those, like the ignoring them completely strategy will fail. I think it's a key thing for Democrats.
You said both and.
It's got to be both and.
Because if we're not included in the dialogue, then those politicians don't have to, I don't want to say cater to us because that sounds unfair, but they don't have to really listen to us because we're not perceived as being a part of their constituency. So that piece has really got to happen. One of the, I'm hoping that your colleagues will listen to this podcast when it's out, because one of the things what I really want to say is this is an opportunity to really engage. And again, this may be true for anyone, but when you're African American and you have your own platform like this podcast to say things that you want to say, it's easy to become sort of a nuisance. Like there's some things going on with University of Wisconsin-Madison. I love it. I just actually filmed a Why I Love UW-Madison video. My mom has dementia, but I talked about what coming back to college as a 30-year-old divorcee meant to my mom. But the same week that comes out, there's a homecoming video that has no black people in it, and the AKA, a historically black sorority, sat for hours to be recorded into the video, and it was just sort of cut. And so I challenge systems that I love. I love UW-Madison. We got 13 degrees from it. I love it. I love Madison. I could live in other places. I do want dual citizenship with Ghana. I just got back there. Every once in a while, I need to Ghana just to blacken up my soul to deal with Madison. But I want to be part of the solution. I don't want to just say this community, like what was it, Jack Nicholson when he played the Joker. This town needs an enema. I want to do more than just point out the issues. I do want to be part of the discussion. And so one of the things I want my Democratic friends to know is that I'm here. I'm open. I want to talk.
Let's get your phone ringing off the hook.
I want to talk and connect because there are times I don't just need to go in and just say, I need some money. I need a hookup. I'm a thought leader. And when I'm not here, I'm sitting with ambassadors from, Korea to Manhattan. I'm talking to folks who are worldly. I'm sitting down in rooms with folks who are like CEOs of AOL. I mean, we're talking, we're processing. I come back to Madison and I don't have those connections. And again, part of that's on me. I put my blinders on just to do my work because I never want to be the person that's chasing those opportunities. But I feel like
But let's.
I don't want to be the black leader. I want to be a leader who's black.
Yep.
And so I'm saying that to offer, and you made the offer. There are things you've talked with me about, but I also want to come out. I just want to come across as when I see opportunity to communicate, to network, and to bring about change, I like to really point it out. And so I guess I'd love for you to respond to that, but then also ask me how does a person with this platform where I'm certainly voicing the concerns and thoughts of black people, I get high fives and slaps on the back like, I can't believe you just said that to white folks. But then I also have white people writing me saying, I've never thought about these issues. Thank you. Or I've got churches playing them with their staff members and wanting to talk realistically about race. So I've got this platform where I can speak honestly to the issue without fear of alienating people. If you have any thoughts of how I continue or proliferate this platform or dovetail it with some of the work you're wanting to do to connect with the community, any thoughts about how this kind of work and this kind of platform can be used for the greater good of our community and our state? Yeah. I'm open to ideas and suggestions because I want to be a part of the solution.
Yeah. I think, a couple of things come to mind. So one of them is when you think about the racial wealth gap, the key thing is building black wealth.
Yes.
It's not
Ben Wikler, you just swore. You just said black wealth.
But it's not just anti-poverty programs. It's building black wealth so that people,
Y'all, I'm loving this white man right now. So I'm sorry to me to cut you off.
Yeah, but I think there's a corollary in politics. It's about building black political power.
Yes.
So that if somebody wants to run for office, that they need to be talking to folks across race and not just talking to a group of power brokers and insiders. And that project, it goes beyond any one of us, but there's lots of things that each of us can do.
That's helpful.
It's looking for rooms to be in and getting in those rooms. I think one of the things that I can do is I can encourage folks that are running for office, folks that are planning to run for office to come meet with you.
I would love that.
And to talk to you about, see if they can be a guest on your show.
Sure.
There's only so many guests you can have on. I think building the sense, one of the things we're actually doing is putting together advice for Democratic presidential candidates. So when they come to Wisconsin, we have advice to them about how to win. And part of that is going to be advice about here are different leaders in different communities that you need to talk to. This is stuff that they're hungry for, and making sure that as the party we're able to help candidates who are visiting to navigate these waters, and also candidates who are coming up here. There's going to be a Supreme Court race next spring. There's my friend Frances Huntley Cooper is the only black woman who's been elected mayor in Wisconsin.
Right.
And there's going to be tons of mayor's races next spring. And whether you're a non-black candidate who's running, who's going to need to connect with black voters to be able to be elected, or a black candidate who's wants to be the second, and third and fourth and 10th, I hope, to expand what being a mayor looks like in the state. At the party, we can help people to talk to the folks that they need to talk to. And once you become part of that world, the path to be able to be elected, it means that you have a voice at every step of the way. And, I think that's a kind of a next phase of all the work that you're doing. And I hope that folks who are listening to this show are doing is looking at what are the paths that people have to walk to get to positions of power, and who elected officials in communication with, that creates lines of accountability. And part of it is there's always fundraising and the money aspect. So I would actually say donating money is a good idea, because candidates spend a lot of time on the phone with donors.
Right.
Candidates tend to look for people who can contribute to their campaigns, people who can help them get in front of voters, and people who can help find volunteers. And those are like the three big currencies of politics. And I think the fourth one might be media. And you're building media right here. I mean, we are on a media institution that allows people to reach voters.
Right.
So you wielding all of those so that candidates know.
That makes good sense.
Yeah. And that the more interactions you have during non-crisis moments, then when something is going on, the politician needs to make sure that things are shored up, or something's happening that politicians need to pay attention to.
Sure.
You have your number. The numbers are in each other's
phones. I love
phones.
that. Hey, 2 more questions for you. Will Wisconsin be contextualized when the Democratic Party comes here next year? I mean, the convention's here for several political reasons, because Wisconsin's a hotbed.
Yeah.
But we also know that Milwaukee's just been named one of the most segregated communities, and the mass incarceration. So we don't want to shroud the convention with that. And I don't need to know exactly how, but will that be ignored, or will that be woven into the platform for the convention, that these are the issues. We're in Middle America, and these are the issues facing our Black brothers and sisters, brown brothers and sisters, that we are going to take seriously. I mean, is that is that a part of the platform?
Fighting against this is at the core of the project of the convention.
Okay.
The Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez just was in Madison. He spoke at the Cap Times Idea Fest.
Sure,
and
was.
He said up on the stage that Milwaukee has been in a competition with Detroit to be the most segregated metropolitan area in the country.
Right.
And he's very much alive to that. And I think how they're planning the convention reflects an awareness of this and the necessity of using the convention as a chance to try to fight against it.
Sure.
I think what you'll see from the convention is more likely to be a story of hope, of describing where we need to go. And my guess is that there's a lot of organizations, both in Milwaukee and around the country, who will also be painting the story of how we got to this point.
Sure.
And there's often a division of labor and who communicates what piece of these things. But the goal with all of it is to change the storyline that we're on
and talk about where we're going.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want folks to know about you or your work or your hopes for the convention next year? I just want to give space for you just to have those last words.
So I think where I want to leave it is a invitation to folks to jump in and get involved. And there's a few ways to do that. One is we're hiring for a bunch of different jobs. Right now we have a finance director job, an executive director job. We're looking for diverse candidate pools.
Okay.
I would love for folks to apply for those, to recommend people to me.
I'll certainly think about it.
I will say here in this podcast, I hope people don't post it too much. My email address is ben@wisdems.org if you happen to see.
Sure.
So we're looking for those jobs. We'll be hiring a whole bunch of other jobs in the course of the next year. So building the talent pool of folks who can do this kind of political work, that's a critical success factor for us. There's also something called Organizing Corps 2020, which intentionally, they just had their first cohort this summer. It was, I think, 77% people of color. It was a ton of African-American college students in Milwaukee who went through this 6-week organizer training in the summer. And they become the next generation of field organizers for the party. They are just open recruitment for Organizer Corps 2020 as well.
Wow.
So that's an opportunity for a bunch of folks to get involved. If you go to wisdems.org, WISDEMS.org, you can sign up to click on membership, sign up to be a member of the party. That allows you to then vote in the convention for platform, all this kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then you can go to a county party meeting. And my recommendation would be go with a group. So, there's always this question of, am I going to be the only person like me in the room? But the Dane Dems have meetings on first Wednesday of every month.
All right.
At the Concourse Hotel. It's hundreds of people in the room, and it is, that is where people announce their candidacies and are recruited to get involved in stuff. And like that is the county party meetings are kind of the heart of how the party works.
So once people register, they're free to go to those.
So you can go even without registering.
Okay.
You can register there, or you can register and then go.
Sure.
Up to you. But get involved in the county. The county party is kind of the base layer of bricks in how the party works, and then ultimately how democracy works. This is something that I've learned about since I ran for chair. I remember going to a county party meeting in Rock County, and someone was like, these 4 different appointed positions are going to come open. Anyone here interested? And it's like, wow, that's it. Right. You show up, you get on a commission, you get involved, and suddenly you're on track to be able to run for office. You're on the city council. You're setting policies that affect all the people in the community. It's an amazing. It's this like the best kept secret in politics that if you find where your county party is meeting, you can actually get plugged straight into the political
I'm going
process.
to tell people about those county meetings seriously because that's people can vote, but this is how you have influence.
Yes,
this is how you get to the table, and you're sharing with me what white people have been knowing forever. These are things that you can do and how you get involved. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Listen, folks, didn't I tell you this was going to be another exciting episode? I've been looking forward to having Ben Wikler on here ever since I sort of dropped the idea on him a bit ago during coffee. But I know that this was informative. It's inspired. It's given me some great ideas in its way of networking. And we need some hope in this nation. We need a win. There's a lot of ugliness that's going on, and that's not just code for Republican Party. We've just been acting real un-American, and we just need to learn how to appreciate each other to get some good things done and to get this country healed up so that we can really be what we're supposed to be. So, Ben, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you and your work, and I'm looking forward to doing more work together. Thank you for tuning in to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. I want to thank Corey Saffold for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nyland, engineer and editor, Eli Steenlich, my editor, Jeremy Holliday, and a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me.
Ooh, Black Like Me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.
Ooh.